Buried in the book of Genesis is one of the strangest, most debated passages in the entire Bible. It is a single brief mention of beings called the Nephilim, often translated as giants, born from a union between sons of God and human women. The passage is so short and so strange that scholars have argued about what it actually means for over 2,000 years. Across centuries of biblical scholarship, ancient Jewish theology, and modern archaeology, this brief fragment has inspired wild theories, elaborate mythology, and intense academic dispute. Why would the book of Genesis include such an abrupt, mysterious reference right before the story of Noah's flood? What were these beings, and where did they come from? Today, we are examining what the ancient Hebrew text actually says, the very different ways it has been interpreted throughout history, and why this remains one of the most genuinely contested passages in biblical scholarship. To understand the controversy, we have to start with the text itself. The passage appears in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, immediately preceding the narrative of the Great Flood. It states that when human beings began to increase in number on the earth, the sons of God saw that human women were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the text makes its famous declaration. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. That is the entire account, just 4 verses, with almost no explanation of who or what the sons of God actually were, and no detailed physical description of the Nephilim themselves, beyond that brief mention of them being mighty heroes of old. Even the word Nephilim is a subject of major scholarly debate. Traditionally, ancient translations like the Greek Septuagint rendered the word as gigantes, meaning giants or earthborn ones. However, modern Hebrew lexicographers note that the linguistic root of Nephilim is most likely the verb nephal, which means to fall. Under this analysis, Nephilim literally translates to the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall, such as fierce warriors or tyrants. Because this vague passage is immediately followed by God's judgment and the decision to send the flood due to widespread human corruption, readers throughout history have connected the two events. Yet, carefully read, the Genesis text does not explicitly state that the Nephilim were the direct cause of the flood, only that they existed in that era of moral decay. So who were the sons of God who fathered these beings? This question is where interpretation splits sharply, and has for thousands of years. The oldest interpretation, preserved in ancient Jewish apocalyptic texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, describes the sons of God as literal fallen angels, often referred to as watchers. According to this Enochic tradition, these celestial beings descended to Mount Hermon, took human wives, and taught humanity forbidden knowledge, including metallurgy, sorcery, and warfare. Their hybrid offspring became the Nephilim, titanic giants whose violence consumed the earth. This angelic view was the dominant interpretation in early Judaism and among many early Christian writers for centuries, viewing the flood as a necessary cleansing of an unnatural cosmic rebellion. However, a second, competing interpretation emerged strongly in later rabbinic and Christian scholarship, known as the Sethite view. Advocated by prominent thinkers like St. Augustine, this view argues that the sons of God were not literal angels, but rather the righteous descendants of Adam's son Seth. In this reading, the daughters of humans represent the morally corrupt Cainite bloodline. When the godly Sethites intermarried with the ungodly Cainites, the resulting moral collapse produced ruthless rulers and tyrants. In this view, the word giants is understood metaphorically to denote powerful, violent warlords of renown, rather than literal physical giants. Both the angelic view and the Sethite view have serious historical and scholarly backing, and neither has ever achieved universal consensus. Complicating the mystery even further, the word Nephilim appears a second time in the Hebrew Bible, hundreds of years after the flood narrative. In the book of Numbers, chapter 13, Israelite scouts return from exploring the land of Canaan and report seeing people of great stature. They state, "We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This connects to a broader pattern across several Hebrew texts describing unusually tall populations, such as the Anakim, the Rephaim, and most famously, Goliath of Gath in the book of Samuel. Interestingly, while modern Bibles often describe Goliath as over 9 feet tall based on the Masoretic text, earlier Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and the Greek Septuagint record his height as 4 cubits and a span, which is roughly 6 feet 9 inches. Because of these ancient descriptions, the internet is flooded today with claims and sensational photographs purporting to show giant human skeletons measuring 10, 20, or even 30 feet tall, presented as physical proof of the Nephilim. It is important to be direct and scientifically rigorous about this. Every widely circulated photograph of this kind that has ever been investigated has turned out to be a hoax. They are either digitally edited images created for Photoshop competitions, forced perspective photography tricks, or fabricated museum displays. No legitimate archaeological excavation published in any peer-reviewed scientific journal or verified by any recognized institution has ever recovered giant human remains of this kind. These viral photos are modern internet myths with no basis in archaeology. So where does serious biblical scholarship stand today? Most mainstream historians and linguists view Genesis 6 as an ancient, fragmentary preservation of a Mesopotamian tradition incorporated by the biblical authors to illustrate the profound moral disorder of the pre-flood world. Rather than a scientific or historical record of literal human-angel hybrids, the passage serves as a theological preface to the flood narrative. Yet the angelic watcher interpretation remains a critical subject of study for historians of ancient Jewish apocalyptic literature. What makes this passage so enduringly fascinating is not a hidden skeleton waiting to be uncovered in the dirt. It is that a text this brief, this enigmatic, and this old has generated genuine scholarly dialogue for over 2 millennia without being definitively resolved. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient biblical mystery, subscribe to follow us on our next exploration of history's most debated stories.